This marriage is over. Meri? Those 5 words dropped from Kody Brown's mouth like shattered glass, cutting through the hushed courtroom. The noise was not boisterous, not yelled, but it weighed so heavily that it seemed to drain the air out of the room. Reporters stopped scribbling mid-sentence. The hushed rustle of paper stopped. Even the ceiling fan's hum overhead appeared to halt for a moment of suspended time, leaving nothing but those words ringing like a clap of thunder in the ears of all who heard. Kody Brown, the former charismatic leader of a vast polygamous family, stood with squared shoulders, his blonde locks slicked back, his jaw set with stubborn pride. His dark suit was crisp, too crisp, like armor he put on to hide the tempest churning inside. He did not regard Meri as a man ending a holy union. He regarded her like a man closing loose ends, cold, final. Meri Brown sat across the aisle. Her fingers shook in her lap, wringing the tissue she had clutched since the hearing had started. She had known this moment would arrive. She had sensed it for years in the way Kody's eyes no longer lingered on her, in the way his words cut short, bitter, dismissive. But to know it in your bones, and to hear it out loud, in front of strangers, in front of children, in front of cameras, were 2 very different sorts of pain. Her breathing caught, the tears welling up until the edges of her vision blurred. She blinked madly, not wanting to let them drop yet. But when she opened her mouth, her voice cracked, weak but with incredulity. "After everything I did for you, Kody, this is how it ends." The gallery shifted uncomfortably, a ripple of whispers running through the benches. A few of the Brown children, adults now, sitting together with stiff shoulders and clasped arms, bent their heads to the floor, refusing to look up at their mother. A handful of reporters frantically scribbled in notepads, looking for the soundbite that would top the headlines tomorrow. Sister Wives Divorce Showdown. They could already envision the large letters set across shiny covers. The judge, a silver-haired woman with tightly pulled back hair and a stern expression, raised her eyes from the papers on her bench and took in the room. Her eyes met Kody first, then Meri, then the fidgety gallery. She cocked her gavel, a small gesture that this was not, after all, an acting space, although everyone present was aware it had evolved to be just that. The air hung thick, heavy almost, as if the walls themselves were closing in to catch the next words. Meri clutched the tissue in her hand tighter, her knuckles white. Her mind flashed with images of the past, painful and fragmented. Their wedding, the vows they had exchanged under the heat of the Nevada sun, the laughter they shared when the world had been full of promise. She had been his initial wife, his pillar, the one that had believed in him when nobody else did. And now, here he was, reducing decades of love and fidelity to a single sentence. Kody remained unshaken, his expression carved in stone. His gaze never softened, not even when Meri's words trembled with heartbreak. To him, this was business. A decision made long ago, executed now with the precision of a blade. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable, until finally, the judge leaned forward. Her voice, calm but firm, broke through the tension. "Mr. Brown, Mrs. Brown, the court recognizes the seriousness of today's proceedings. This is not merely a dissolution of marriage. It is the deconstruction of a shared history, an interwoven family. I will not have this room reduced to pandemonium. Speak only as spoken to, and let us proceed with dignity." Her words settled the gallery, but Meri's heart still pounded wildly. She wanted to scream, to ask Kody how he could stand there so coldly after years of shared life, after nights of whispered prayers for their children, after everything they had built. But instead, she sat still, tears burning the edges of her eyes. From the second row, Christine adjusted uncomfortably, firing glances at Janelle. No words were exchanged, but the tension between the wives was electric. Each had her own wounds from Kody, each her own tale of deception. But today, the spotlight of sorrow fell on Meri alone. Whispers resurfaced in the gallery. A reporter's pen scribbled hungrily across a notepad. "Meri Brown breaks down in courtroom showdown." Meri heard the faint whisper, and was overcome with a wave of humiliation. Was her suffering mere entertainment now? Were her tears mere headlines to fuel the non-stop rumors about their broken family? She swallowed hard, setting her jaw and trying not to let the world witness her totally shattering. But within, she was shattering, splintering. Each second ticking away like hours, every breath more labored than before. Kody, on the other hand, moved slightly, folding his arms in a look of faint annoyance, as if the entire experience was a bother. His eyes flashed for a moment to the clock on the wall, then back to the judge. Not once did he glance at Meri. Not once did he recognize the maelstrom of emotions unspooling in the woman who had once been his whole world. The judge rapped her pen on the desk, indicating to the attorneys that they could proceed. But for that instant, that excruciating moment between declaration and deliberation, the only sound anyone could hear was the lingering echo of Kody's words still ringing in the air. "This marriage is over, Meri." The sentence hung in the air like cigarette smoke, stifling, indelible. And despite the trial having just started, everyone present understood. Everything would forever be different now. The courtroom was no longer merely a place of law. For Meri, it was a stage where all her past heartbreaks were reenacted in sad flashes, every memory ripping at her chest, as if reminding her of every sacrifice, every wound, every broken promise that had led her to this point. Her gaze landed on Kody once more. She had once loved that man with a passion she could hardly put into words. It was then, before fame, before the cameras, before the world witnessed their lives unfold, that it was only the two of them. She recalled their wedding day clearly. The heat of the Nevada sun, the plain ceremony, the way that Kody had gazed at her with a grin so broad she was sure her heart would burst. He was young, driven, and full of aspirations. He informed her that she was his partner, his equal, his everlasting, and she believed him with every fiber of her being. In those early years, Meri stood tall at his side. She was his legal wife, the anchor of a young family that was just starting out. She bolstered his visions of a polygamous family, even when it pained her. She felt that sharing her husband with other women would be an act of faith, of love, of spiritual devotion. It wasn't easy, but she did it. For him. And with each new wife, there was a little crack in her heart. Janelle came on board, then Christine. Meri smiled through the tears, reminding herself this was God's doing, that her sacrifices would pay off, that Kody still loved her just as much as he used to. But gradually, nearly imperceptibly, the gap between them widened. Nights that had been spent talking and laughing together turned into nights that he spent elsewhere. Moments that had been full of kisses turned into brusque exchanges. She began to feel herself vanishing, a background player in a tale for which she had formerly been the star. Nevertheless, she persisted. She kept her head held high for the sake of the children, for the sake of the family. She reminded herself that love was sacrifice, and sacrifice was sacred. And then Robin arrived. With Robin's arrival, everything shifted. Kody shone brighter with her than he had in years with Meri. He smiled more broadly, laughed harder, his eyes shining with the sort of happiness Meri hadn't seen from him in what felt like an eternity. Initially, Meri attempted to be glad for him. She opened her arms wide and welcomed Robin into the family, chided herself into thinking this was merely another trial of her faith. But deep down she knew she was being replaced. The way Kody defended Robin, protected her, doted on her children, it cut deeper than words ever could. He spent holidays at her side, whispered with her in corners, and slowly stopped looking at Meri altogether. Meri's once central place in Kody's heart shrank until she was little more than an afterthought. And the world saw it. The cameras caught the tension, the cold shoulders, the moments where Kody dismissed her like she was a nuisance, instead of a wife. Millions of viewers watched as Meri's heartbreak unfolded on television, turning her private pain into public entertainment. Every awkward moment, every tear, every look of rejection became fodder for strangers to gossip about. Her rock bottom was the now infamous catfishing debacle. It wasn't an error, it was a desperate pleas for attention, for connection, for someone to notice her when Kody no longer would. And what she received, instead of understanding, was humiliation. Kody never allowed her to forget, using it as ammunition that she was the one who had betrayed him, and ignoring the years of abandonment that had pushed her there in the first place. And now, as she sat in that courtroom, all those memories hung over her like chains. She was not only battling a divorce, she was battling the years she had devoted to a man who had methodically eroded her self-worth. Her lawyer leaned in gently, whispering reassurance. But Meri's mind was far away. She saw flashes of herself as a young bride, full of hope. She saw the nights she stayed up alone, waiting for Kody to return, only to be met with silence. She saw herself plastering on smiles for the cameras, pretending everything was fine while her heart quietly broke. And she saw Kody now standing there, even and unruffled, as if it didn't matter at all. As if she hadn't mattered at all. A lump rose in her throat, and she blinked hard, not letting the tears fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart again. Not here. Not now. For a moment her gaze wandered over to the gallery. A few of her children sat rigid, their faces inscrutable. She didn't know what they were thinking. Did they blame her? Did they empathize with her pain? Or were they simply embarrassed, torn between loyalty to their father and sympathy for their mother? The murmurs in the courtroom swelled, like an unrelenting chorus. Journalists strained forward, willing to catch every hint of emotion crossing her face, every indication of vulnerability they could twist into tomorrow's front page. But Meri raised her chin by a fraction of an inch. She would not be their shattered headline. She was the first wife, the one who had begun it all. And although Kody had discarded her, although he had established his new existence with Robin, although he had made her a ghost within her marriage, she was still present, still standing, and she would not leave quietly. The lights in the courtroom appeared more harsh, blinding all with their unblinking gaze. The tension that had been building since morning was finally going to reach its boiling point. Lawyers fidgeted with their ties, papers were shuffled, and the judge eased back a little in her chair, anticipating what she knew would be the most dramatic segment of the hearing. The bailiff's voice boomed. "We will now hear opening arguments." Kody's lawyer, a lean man of sharp lines and voice like a knife, stood first. He slowly buttoned his jacket, methodically before moving towards the front. Addressing the judge, he gave his words an almost scripted calmness. "Your Honor, my client Mr. Kody Brown is present today not as a villain, but as a man seeking freedom from a long-broken marriage. This is no impulsive choice, nor one made lightly. For years Kody has suffered emotional distance, a lack of partnership, and behaviors that have undermined trust." The lawyer's gaze shifted to Meri momentarily, as if she was but a footnote in the tale he was weaving. "This marriage has not existed as an actual union for quite some time. My client merely wants to move on, close the book with honor, and live a life that represents his existing reality." Kody sat behind him, arms crossed, his face stoic, but the faintest shadow of a smirk played on his lips. He looked satisfied, as though the words were everything he wanted the world to hear. But Meri's lawyer was already on her feet, eyes blazing with fire. She was a woman who radiated strength, her voice sharp but layered with compassion. "Your Honor," she started, "this is not merely a divorce. This is the destruction of a woman's life. My client Meri Brown was Kody's first wife. She was there for him when he had nothing, when he was merely a man with visions. She gave her youth, her fidelity, her very self to this family. And what did she get back in return?" The voice of the attorney rose, resonating through the courtroom. Years of abandonment, years of being set aside while he indulged others. And when she finally cracked under the strain, when she made errors born of isolation, he used them as weapons to justify abandoning her totally. He didn't simply withdraw his affection, Your Honor, he took away from her her dignity, her voice, her position in the family she helped create. A murmur spread through the gallery. Christine and Janelle, sitting together, exchanged glances. Robin sat stiffly in the corner, her lips pressed thin, refusing to meet Meri's eyes. Reporters scribbled frantically, their pens scratching the paper like claws. The judge raised a hand for silence, then turned to Meri's lawyer. "Proceed with your witness." Meri's stomach flipped as her lawyer turned to her. "Meri, please take the stand." Her legs weighed like lead as she stood. Each step towards the witness stand weighed more than the last, as if she was wading through water. She sat, the bailiff administering the oath, her hand shaking as it hovered over the Bible. She spoke the words under her breath, barely loud enough, but firm enough. When she glanced up, her gaze crossed with Kody's for the first time since he uttered those 5 hurtful words. He did not wince. He did not relent. He just gazed back, unwavering, as if challenging her to say something. Her attorney moved cautiously. Meri, can you explain to the court what this marriage has meant to you? The courtroom was silent. Even the journalists dipped their pens, knowing something anguished was about to occur. Meri's throat tightened. She inhaled shakily, her voice cracking at first but slowly finding its rhythm. This union was my existence. The minute I uttered I do, I was convinced in Kody. I was convinced in us. I was his first wife. His wife, the one who believed him enough to bring other women into our lives, because he told me it was our purpose, our family's destiny. I adhered to him, even when it pained me, even when I wept myself to sleep every night. I persisted because I loved him. She hesitated, shaking, but at some point I stopped mattering to him. I disappeared. He grinned at Robin the way he grinned at me. He laughed with her kids, while mine were relegated to the sidelines. And when I messed up, when I was begging someone to notice me, he didn't struggle to keep me. He used it as evidence that I no longer mattered. Gasps went up in the room. Some spectators in the gallery wiped away tears with handkerchiefs. Her lawyer smiled gently. And what was the effect on you, Meri? Meri's lips trembled as she spoke. Her voice weighed down with sorrow. It shattered me. It shattered me into pieces. I didn't believe I could ever reconstruct. I gave him all of it. My time, my allegiance, my trust. And he made me feel that I was nothing. That I was just disposable. Her voice broke over the last word, and she clamped her lips shut, struggling to maintain her equilibrium. For the first time that morning, Kody fidgeted in his seat. His arms dropped from the crossed position. His jaw tightened. The mask of chilly confidence he'd maintained all morning was slipping away. His eyes flickered toward the gallery, then returned to Meri, as if he suddenly realized everyone was watching him and judging him. Then came the tipping point. Meri's attorney inquired, "Meri, if you had one thing to tell Kody at the moment, what would it be?" The courtroom leaned forward, each ear perked up. Meri turned, her eyes meeting his. Her voice was gentle but carried with incredible force. "You said I was your partner. You said I was your equal. But you treated me like a shadow. You didn't just end our marriage, Kody, you erased me. And no matter what happens here today, I need you to know, I deserved better than the scraps of your love." The gallery exploded. Whispers, gasps, even a couple of stifled sobs. The reporters wrote furiously, pages filling with her testimony. Kody's face grew red, his temper breaking. He pounded his hand on the table, his voice growing loud. "You abandoned us way before I did. Meri, don't stand there acting as if you're the victim." The judge's gavel came down like a clap of thunder. "Mr. Brown, you will be silent until spoken to. Do I make myself clear?" Kody slumped back, his face red with rage, his fists doubled up in anger, but otherwise silent. And in that instant, for the first time in years, Meri felt something change. She was no longer the quiet, invisible wife. She had told her truth, and the whole world had heard it. The courtroom had been charged since the beginning, but now was like a bomb, waiting to be detonated. Everyone understood that there was more to it all, and Meri's attorney was about to ignite the fuse. She stood up slowly, her gaze fixed on the judge, her voice measured but sharp. "Your Honor, before proceeding further, we need to talk about the issue of financial malfeasance." A ripple of whispers swept the room. Even the judge's brows furrowed as she leaned forward. Kody sat stiffly in his seat, his eyes narrowing. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering something frantically in his ear. But Kody waved him off, his jaw set like granite. Meri's lawyer lifted a folder, thick with documents. "Over the course of this marriage, Mr. Brown has consistently funneled family funds into accounts and expenses that disproportionately benefited one wife, Robin Brown, while leaving my client financially unsupported and emotionally abandoned." The words struck like a hammer. The gallery exploded into whispers and gasps. The reporters writing furiously, pens scratching against paper. Christine's eyes grew wide. Janelle put her hand over her mouth. Even some of the grown-up Brown children shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces revealing a combination of shock and outrage. The judge slammed her gavel once. Order in the court. But the whispers did not fade easily. Meri's lawyer pressed on, her voice unwavering. Bank records show withdrawals, transfers and payments made directly toward properties and luxuries tied solely to Robin's household. Meanwhile, my client, who devoted decades of her life to building this family, was cut off, left with little to no financial security. She held up a paper for the judge to see. Exhibit A, a $200,000 transaction toward a property purchased in Robin's name, while at the same time Meri's requests for funds to maintain her own household went unanswered. The judge's eyes narrowed as she skimmed the document. Mr. Brown, is this accurate? All eyes were on Kody. His face flushed, his chest heaving more quickly. He leaned forward, his tone hard. I supported this family for decades. I built this whole thing. If I decided to assist Robin, it was because she required it most. That does not equal neglecting Meri. Neglected? Meri's voice sliced the room like a knife. She had not intended to say anything, but the words leaped from her throat before she could silence herself. Her eyes were furious, her tears forgotten. You left me with nothing, Kody. You dumped everything into her. Your time, your love, your money, and I was left in the dark. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you were fair. Gasps ran again, louder this time. Robin, rigid at the back of the court, looked down, her complexion white as a sheet. The judge held up her hand for quiet, but the tension in the air was too charged. The truth had broken the lid wide open, and there was no turning back now. Meri's lawyer continued, flipping through more documents. Exhibit B. Family accounts drained for vacations, cars and expenses that only benefited Robin's children. Exhibit C. Proof of funds transferred without disclosure, leaving Meri financially stranded. The papers landed on the judge's desk with heavy thuds, each one a nail in the coffin of Kody's credibility. Kody's calm snapped. He pounded his hand on the table, his voice ringing over the din. This is sick. Robin is my wife too. She was in need of my assistance. Meri wasn't a wife years ago, and she knows it. The gavel came down with a loud crack on the bench. Mr. Brown, sit down, and compose yourself, boomed the judge. But Kody wasn't finished. His voice boomed, filled with bitterness. She's painting herself as a victim, but she's the one who checked out. She's the one who embarrassed this family with her mistakes. Don't act like I'm the monster. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even the reporters stopped writing for a moment, their mouths hanging open. Meri struggled to rise, her body shaking but her voice firm. She gazed at him with a blend of pain and strength, the kind that only a woman who had been shattered could muster. You want to discuss mistakes, Kody? Okay. I made them. I confess. But you deserted me way before I ever lost my bearings. You deserted us when Robin stepped into your world. You showered her with everything and left me with nothing. That is the truth, and the world needs to know it. Her words rang out like a verdict in themselves. The gallery sat frozen, some dabbing their eyes, others shaking their heads in disbelief at Kody. Even Christine, once silent, nodded subtly, in support of Meri's truth. The judge leaned forward, her voice stern but controlled. This court is not going to be utilized as a prop for shouting matches. But the evidence heard here presents serious questions that will be considered in this proceeding. Both sides will have their opportunity to respond. She slammed her gavel again, regaining order. But it was too late. For the first time in years, Kody appeared shaken, his bravado broke, his jaw clenched, his eyes flicking to the ground instead of locking onto the eye of the woman he used to consider his wife. And for the first time in years, Meri regained something she believed she had lost for good: control. She had told her story. The secrets were revealed, and the whole world was finally hearing. The courtroom, which had been abuzz with murmurs just seconds earlier, had descended into a near petrifying hush. Papers rested untouched on the tables. Reporters' pens suspended in mid-air held their breath. Even the gallery, Women, children, and strangers together sat transfixed, gazing at the bench. The judge leaned forward, her glasses slipping low on the bridge of her nose as she read through the mountain of evidence piled in front of her. Her face was unfathomable, sculpted out of years of neutrality. But the weight of the room was not to be denied. Everyone knew that this decision would determine more than a marriage. It would determine the legacy of the Brown family itself. Finally, after an eternity, the judge cleared her throat. The ring of her gavel brought the room to order once more. This court, she started, her voice firm and authoritative, has heard evidence from both sides. We have heard allegations of emotional neglect, financial irresponsibility, and abandonment of marital obligations. We have considered the evidence with care, and today, this court will issue its verdict. Meri's chest tightened, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had waited for this moment, dreaded it, prayed for it, feared it, and now it was here. Kody sat stiffly at the opposite table, his jaw set, his arms folded like a fortress. He looked at the judge, not Meri, his pride refusing to acknowledge the woman beside him. The judge's gaze swept between them. This marriage between Kody Brown and Meri Brown is hereby dissolved. The divorce is granted. A sharp gasp broke from Meri's lips, though she had expected the words. Around the courtroom, whispers erupted like a wave, the sound of dozens of voices buzzing with shock. Reporters scrambled to record every word, their pens flying across paper. But the judge was not done. She picked up one of the papers, the book she had shaken everyone to the core with a moment before. Her voice became more pointed. In addition, this court believes there is substance to the argument of financial imbalance. Mr. Brown's distribution of family money left Mrs. Brown unbalanced. Consequently, Mrs. Brown is deserving of a just settlement that guarantees her capability for stability and independence in the future. Kody's head jerked up. What? His voice was like a crack of thunder, with rage and disbelief filling it. He rose half out of his chair before his lawyer caught his arm, whispering roughly to him to sit down. The judge brought the gavel down once, her voice slicing over his objection. Mr. Brown, you will stay seated, or you will be taken out of this courtroom. Do you understand? Kody's nostrils were flared, but he sank back into the chair, his hands clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. He was red in the face, his breathing irregular. Meri, on the other hand, sat stock still in her chair. Her ears were ringing with the judge's words. Entitled to a fair settlement, maintain stability and independence. Years of having been ignored, discarded, treated as if she did not exist. And here was evidence, legal, irrefutable evidence, that she did. Tears streamed down her face. But these tears were nothing like those she'd cried through the lonely nights, when Kody's love had wandered elsewhere. These were tears of release. Tears of freedom. The judge rested back, her last words spoken with finality. This case is closed. May both sides proceed with dignity and clarity. The gavel slapped the bench one final time. Quiet. Then pandemonium. The gallery erupted with talk. Some journalists bolted from the courtroom to be the first to report the news. Others talked frantically, their eyes locked between Meri and Kody. Christine breathed a visible sigh of relief, while Janelle clutched a tissue to her eyes, quietly wiping away tears. Even Robin, normally calm, appeared shaken, her face pale as she avoided everyone's eye. Kody leapt to his feet, his chair scraping against the shiny floor. His face was thunderous, his jaw locked, his eyes black with rage. He did not glance at Meri. He did not glance at the judge. He just strode for the courtroom doors, his boots pounding like drums. Reporters rushed after him, cameras popping, questions shouting, Kody, do you have a statement? Kody, how do you feel about the settlement? But he remained silent. He pushed through the doors, out of sight in a burst of rage. And then, everyone looked to Meri. She stood up slowly, nearly hesitantly at first, her body shaking with the weight of what had just occurred. But as she rose, something changed in her stance. Her shoulders squared, her chin came up, the tears still sparkled on her cheeks. But her eyes glowed with a quiet fire. For years, she had been the forgotten wife. The one that had been cast aside. The shadow. But here, in the middle of that courtroom, she was something different. She was free. Reporters flooded around her, calling out her name, pleading for a comment. But Meri just gave a small, steady smile. She didn't scream. She didn't have to explain. Her truth had been said, and the judge had upheld it. She looked to the gallery, where a few of her children stood up, their eyes brimming with pride and sadness. One of them softly mouthed, "We love you, Mom." She needed that. As she made her way towards the doors, the ring of cameras firing followed in her wake like thunder. But this time it did not burden her. It elevated her. For she was aware of what narrative they would convey. Not of a shattered woman, but of a survivor. The large wooden doors creaked open, and light fell on her face. She stepped out into the sunlight, smelling the fresh air on her skin, drying tears from her cheeks. For the first time in 40 years, she wasn't walking out as Kody Brown's wife. She was walking out as Meri Brown, complete, unbroken, and free. And while the marriage had ended, her life was really only just getting started.